Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures, Daily Dose of Nature. Today's topic, Practical Photo Editing Tips for Everyone, Part 2, presented by NatHab Expedition Leader Richard de Gouveia. I'm your host, Rob Mess. Thank you all so much for joining us here today. Over to you, Richard.
Thank you, Rob. Hi there, folks. What a wonderful evening it is. At least it is here. And I'm really excited to continue where we left off last week with some more practical photo editing tips and trying to work you through my process of post-production and what I do and why I do it. And I think to recap, for those who might not have been watching the first one, it is available on the YouTube channels, on NatHab's YouTube channel, so you can go check it out there, or just ask Rob and send him a message, and I'm sure they'll be able to email you the link to those, to the first one. But effectively, what we're doing is we're trying to take images and bring them back to what our eyes saw. There are two forms of editing, one which is very creative and takes things to a different level, and second, or most, what I do is documentary photography. So even in an image like you see here with these gorillas, when I take the photo, it looks very different to what it did when my eyes saw, because our eyes are the best cameras in the world. Our eyes have the ability to send signals to our brain, and even the brightest areas get dulled down and our darker areas get lit up. So we have this beautiful range, which we call dynamic range of light, which we can see in. So when we look at a sunset, we see the beautiful colors above and we see a well-lit foreground. If you take a photo of that, your sky is either beautiful and the foreground is dark, or vice versa. And that is what we're trying to do with photo editing. So again, as a recap, I'm going to take us back to a few images, some new images, and the balance that comes out of images. So let's look at these three elephants. What I love about this image, and when I saw it, was one, it was taken from a long way away. If you look in the top corner, I was using a 70-200, and I was effectively trying to get these three animals moving along towards this drinking point. And 3 is always a good number. Anything that's in odd numbers, 1, 3, 5, 7, and anything above 7 is too many to count, so our brains don't worry about it. But odd numbers, our brains love. So getting low to the water, because we were on a boat in the Kazinga Channel on one of our gorilla adventures. One of the activities is to do this trip on the Kazinga, which joins Lake Edward and Lake George. And we see elephants and we see loads and loads and loads of awesome birds. But this was a cool situation. And the way my camera caught it was beautiful, but it's not quite at the level as what I would like to show it. So I'm going to edit this and pull this up. So we need to balance light. In order to get it there, we're balancing the light. So I'm going to pull back highlights to try and bring back these areas front and back, and you will see now that the blues become a little bit richer. I can then lift my shadows so that I get a bit more detail in the elephants that were walking along here. And you can see now that we got all of the detail within these elephants. Beautiful thing. If we go to the before, you will notice that it's very dark inside there, not a lot of detail. So all I'm doing by lifting the shadows is putting this detail back into this image and back into the areas where I wish to have it. Now, what I'm trying to do is also create a bit of contrast and make sure that I'm leading you to the right places. So this little circle with the dotted circle with the blurriness in front, if I click this, this allows me to add masks. Now, a mask is basically an area which I am able to work and edit on a specific area without doing anything to the rest of the image. Now, you might say, okay, this is cheating, but we were able to do this with film cameras too. just by taking different chemicals, applying them to different areas, we were able to dodge and burn different spaces, which then allowed us to lift light, drop light, to add contrast and do different things to them. So I'm going to select the subject. The artificial intelligence built in here did a great job of highlighting where I want to work. So I'm going to work on these elephants. I'm going to lift some of the texture and the clarity on these guys just to add a little bit more oomph to them to make sure they stand out. And then what I would like to do is to, in a different sense, I'm going to select a color range because I want to work on the blues here. And once I click on an area, if I wanted to, I could choose the greens. But in this case, I want to work on the blues because I want to deepen these blues and make them a little bit more rich. And within this color range area, I can refine it by making it less or broaden that spectrum to more, which is actually where I want to go to, pretty much 100% of that, just so that I can bring that all in. If it hasn't got all of that, I can again say add color range and see what color that is and add that to the mask, and now it's got everything. But I also now, if you look carefully, I have the elephants in there, which I do not want. So I'm going to say subtract my subject, and then boom, I have this refined thing. Now previously I would have had to paint around edges and try to do all different things, and that wouldn't have worked so well. Now I have the ability to push and pull, and all I'm going to do is I'm actually going to take the temperature controller and take this more to the blues. I don't want to take it too far that it becomes unnatural, because the things in editing is if you over edit color and sharpness, it will look over edited. You can already see by looking at that looks purple. It does not look natural. It's not great. So I'm going to bring it back. This was what it was previously. Let me switch that off. That's what it was. And I'm just going to drag that down a little bit to make it a little bit more blue. So this is before and after. Not a gigantic change, but a very impactful one. And that's what we're trying to get to. Quick edits that then show us exactly what we need to do. Bringing contrast back to an image. This is a beautiful young baby hyena. It was walking up on us. Very cool. In the burnt area, we were in right at a den site, and they'd recently burnt fire breaks through the area. And these fire breaks are to slow fire movement or to burn patches, which is done periodically because the African bush is very pyrophytic, especially down in the southern parts of Africa, and it requires the fire to clear out the dead grasses so the new ones can grow. And the whole thing here, this is a fantastic image. I love it a lot already just as it is, but you will see how much it changes when we utilize contrast. So the first thing I would do with this is bring down and bring my crop in a little bit so that I can go in. That now focuses the viewer. There wasn't much other space needed. I have also in that put the head right at this transition point or crossing point, which is called a power spot for the rule of thirds, allowing for him to look into the image. Anything where he's not looking is the negative space. Everything in front of him is positive space. We don't want to take it to the point that the negative space is too little, because you will see that the image feels unbalanced. You're like, whoa, what were you doing? What were you trying to photograph? So it's about finding balance within the image. And as you can see, it's completely non-destructive Lightroom. And what it does is it allows me to change my edits. Even ones I did last week, I can go back and change completely. Now in this, I'm seeing this curve up top here at my histogram, and I'm going to base a lot on this. But because the computer doesn't know what I'm trying to do, it would normally want to push, a camera would normally want to take a photo with a bell curve that sits in the middle like this. As you can see, that's very overexposed. When I took the image, I had already underexposed it. I'm going to do this a little bit more and underexpose it a little bit more to bring out this darkness and contrast against the young hyena. I might even drop my shadows a bit to bring that contrast in, and I'm making sure I don't clip anything. So if I go over here, if I pull that all the way down or went too dark, this will show me the areas in blue that have no detail in them. And that's not what we want to do. So we'll bring that back to where it was and bring this up a little bit more, but we've got a nice bit of contrast there. I'm then going to choose my subject, and again, AI is going to do its job. Voila, it missed a bit of this leg here, so I'm going to add that in with a brush and just paint this guy in. My flow is a little low in density. I want it quite high so that I can get in there quickly, and I'll leave my auto mask on just so that I can do that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to lift the whites in him and a bit of the highlights in him, and lift texture and clarity. And that will change the image quite, again, not a huge amount, but enough to make the little one pop. So that's before, that's after. And that's what we're doing each of the times that we go into it. Now, where sometimes when we're taking photos, we don't have the ability to get the balance just right. And this is a great example of it. So this, if you can see, is a chimp in a tree. The light is trying to be balanced by the cameras. Now, because I have really nice equipment, my cameras have the ability to have a lot of dynamic range and store a lot of detail even when it doesn't look like there is a lot. So let's go into develop again. Here you will see that there are some clipped areas over there, the blue areas, and there are some clipped red spots up in the top of the sky. And there was no real way that I could balance this light out. So I tried my best in all directions. And all we're going to do here is drop some highlights so that I have this tree at a better exposure, and I'm going to lift my shadows, which is going to bring this all up, but it's not quite enough, so I'm going to bring it up just a touch more and bring my highlights down. Now we've got a better balanced image, and from there I can start tweaking. So you can see that this guy is in here, but now what I've created in him is a lot of noise. Because I've pulled this image to its boundaries, there's a fair amount of noise sitting within this beautiful subject. And I really want to try and pull the viewer towards this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, one, choose my subject, and it should find him pretty easily. Voila, the tree is cool, that's part of it. Again, it missed part of his arm and stuff, so I'm just going to go in with my brush, drop this feather down, and I'm going to paint in the areas that I still want to be part of this subject. All right, and then I'm going to work on him again. Let's see if we can bring a bit of the shadows out again, bring some contrast back to him by adding some blacks, and add some texture and clarity. Now, again, we can now really see that noise starting to work. Now, this is never going to be an image that I'm going to enter into a competition. It's going to be something that I am keeping for my nostalgia, or something that I'm going to share with the guests. And then they'll have the ability to have these memories of moments that happened. This was a very tough chimp trek. We'd walked probably 8 miles, and it was in a food shortage time, and this guy was the only one that came down in that trek for 5 minutes, and then he went back up. So to have these moments for the guests so that they can just be present for those 5 minutes is a big thing. Now, Lightroom doesn't do everything, and there's some really cool ways that we can sort this image out even further. Actually, let's add another mask in here and bring the viewer. What I want to do is I'm going to use a radial gradient tool. I'm going to put it around him like this, and I'm going to invert it. And what this is going to do is it's going to create this soft, I'm even going to make it a bit softer coming in. So you can see it goes from hard red through softer, softer, softer to nothing. And it'll create a filter around him that I can drop my exposure just slightly around it, which will then, let me just do this with my history quickly so that you can see the difference. Before that, add the radial filter. All right, so let's take that away. Take that away, and then I'm going to go back one and down. So you'll see it gets a little darker around the edge, but what it does is it focuses the viewer on getting closer. You'll see how much I can do that, but I don't want to go so far that you would know that I've done that. I want it to be subtle. So we'll do that. Okay, now I'm going to use a plugin called Topaz to fix this noise inside here. And by right-clicking and saying edit in Topaz denoise, or I could send it to Topaz, export this, but this is all integrated. So I can send it to one program. There it opens up denoise. It opens up my different options over here. And I can now start looking at what standard would look like, what clear would look like, what low light would look like, and what severe noise would look like. And at the moment that I'm looking at this, I'm just going to move this guy out of the way so I can see what's happening here. I like the severe noise outlook because it's actually cleaning up a lot of what is plaguing this image. And you can see from clicking there and coming back, let me just go back to single view. Clicking there, that's before, and then after. Before, after. It's actually a little bit too much, so I can bring down my remove noise on this side, and that makes it a little bit better. And we're going to recover some of the original detail. It's looking good. We'll leave it there. And that now is before, noisy, after. And it's done a great job. And all I have to do is hit apply. It will then create a TIF file, a TIFF file. If I worked on the raw file immediately because there was a lot of noise, it would have created a new DNG file. And what it's done is it has actually created two images in here. I'm going to go to my library. You will see that there's one of two and two of two. So I now have two images with that, and this is my edited one. So I've used something to create that balance and to bring back the light. Here's another very difficult photographic situation. You have this very bright sky. Again, look at the U shape in the histogram on the top right over here. And you've got all these dark areas and you've got all these light areas. But I was taking it in a way that I was trying to balance the light so that I could go and say, pull back highlights. Wow, there's a sky. And pull forward the shadows, and suddenly there's Andrew Ackerman, our awesome videographer, and you can see how much noise is inside here, and that's quite a plaguing thing for this. So I'm going to go and again say edit in denoise, edit with the copy, because unfortunately that noise is not there without it. And you can immediately see there is noise gone. There's noise gone, but it's too much in that. So I'm trying to find a happy medium. That doesn't help. Not a great advert to have that die on me. Let's open that again. So low light, this is it working now. Boom versus that versus that. That's feeling much more natural. And if I bring up my recover original detail, it'll start to bring back some of the hairs in that I would lose in a normal denoise process. And that is where I would leave it, which takes me back again, and it will throw that image straight back to Lightroom without me having to do anything. Voila, there's before and there's after. So it keeps it going for us very nicely on that side, and we have a finalized image. Again, nothing that I'm going to enter into a competition, but a great way of showing things off and at least showing people in there what can happen and pulling things back. Now, one of the other tools that we spoke about, because people had asked last week about Topaz. So if we look around the eye here, photographers are very picky about ensuring that they have sharp images. And when we're shooting in situations where things are moving all the time, so let's see the settings here. I was at 1/160th of a second at 16 mils. And in normal cases, this is 10 times faster than my shutter, my speed. But this girl was walking, she was moving right past me. I have a shallow depth of field, and unfortunately, there's just this little bit of lens blur around her eye. And I can go and say edit in Sharpen AI and send this image to that very cool program. And we're going to pull it up here to the eyes to where we can see what's happening. And immediately you can see how sharp the image has become. So it's using artificial intelligence to go from that to that. The image that was not usable is now very usable. And this would work beautifully for prints that you may go, this is an amazing image that I would love to print, but it's a bit noisy. Boom, there we go. And there are multitude on the right here, a multitude of different options that you can choose, and it will update each of them trying to find the right way. For me, standard looks absolutely spectacular. You can still suppress noise within this. You can remove the blur more. You can change artifacts. You can even go in and try and figure out subjects. So let's go out to a full fit here. Zoom to fit. And I'm going to say refine. And we're going to see where the subject is. It's just taking a bit of time. That's what it's found for the subject. So again, the artificial intelligence, just like the other Lightroom, was spectacular in figuring out what was happening and what wasn't. We go back to auto subjects, switch this off and say update. And that's where I'd leave it. And then if I apply that, then suddenly have this wonderful image that was previously a little bit out of focus, but now it's there and I can use it in all its glory as I need to. So boom, and then we go to sharper image. So that's first, that's second. That's the redone image. So you can see how much of a difference that makes to the image and to us being able to utilize it at a later stage. So that's a great way of doing things. The other thing we can do, and the reason why I put this photo in, was to show you that within this program, I'm going to crop this in a little tighter so we have more of him in the mud and less of the background. And I'm going to make it a black and white. So just by clicking up top here where it says black and white, it will take the color out of it. And now I've got to find my balance within this image. So I'm bringing up the shadows, bringing down the highlights, ensuring that I have everything else in it. Let's check the background, see what it chooses. Yeah, it chooses all of that. Subtract the subject. Okay, that only took that. I don't want to darken too much of this, but now we can darken the background a little bit to create that contrast again. Maybe lift the whites in that. And then I'm going to select subject, which shouldn't do too badly, and increase the texture and clarity within that guy, and that then will make a passable black and white. Not amazing. I think if I spent more time on it, we could really tweak it, but the idea was to try and work those areas with all of this mud and everything to create this beautiful moving black and white image. Cool. So now I'm just trying to see if there's anything else. We've done sky balance in that one. Here's another giraffe image. This light was just really beautiful against the background. I'm going to drop the highlights a touch to bring these oranges out in the back here. I'm going to lift my shadows a bit to bring out the giraffe in here. I'll select my subject to again add a bit of texture and clarity so that they pop a little. And then I'm going to add a linear gradient. So it's a sloping, slow gradient, much like that round one I did. And I'm going to darken this real foreground in the front here, just to ensure that they really pop against everything. I might even drop my texture and clarity in the front end here, just to make sure that that also loses some depth and you really pop the foreground from the background. So that's before, after, before, after. Just a little bit more punch, just with a couple of tweaks, and we can get there. Cool. So let's look at some creative photographs. Sometimes taking photographs, we have to think outside the box. And automatically, when I'm taking photographs, I'm thinking about what I'm going to edit afterwards. And in certain cases, I don't just want to be a documentary photographer. I want to take something that's a little bit more punchy, edgy, and different to just a document. For example, shooting into the sun for this guy, there's quite a bit of clipped area in this light at the back. But just by bringing all of this down a bit, we can bring that orange back in really nicely, and that starts to create a very different image. And if I pull my shadows up, I now get this balance with this giraffe. I'm going to bring my crop in a little tighter so that we've got this real look of the tongue and the face. And I'm going to select my subject and ensure that I have texture and clarity. And because I've pushed and pulled this, there's very high likelihood that there's some noise in here, and even around the eyes it probably could be a bit sharper. So let's go in and let's do a different one altogether. I'm going to go and use the Topaz Photo AI. So this now will look at the entire image and be able to do noise reduction. It'll do sharpening. It will change the size if I need to. We'll sort that out later. And what I can do here is it gives me a whole bunch of options. I can remove noise, which I will do because there's some noise that was in here. We just leave it as normal. There really isn't much to do. I want to sharpen the image. Here we go. There's quite a bit of sharpening inside here, but it actually looks over sharpened. So I'm going to bring the strength of that down and the clarity down so that we don't over sharpen. Because remember what I said earlier, over sharpening and over color, playing with saturation of color, will totally make an image not look real. Now I feel like we're a little bit closer to that without blowing anything out. This is before, that's after, and we can save to Lightroom Classic. As quick and easy as that. Now it's going to send it back to Lightroom, and I have it automatically as a new image in my catalog on my hard drive, no questions asked. So that's before and after. Let's go close in here. Before, a little blurry. After, sharp as a tack and all noise is gone. So really beautiful. The other thing I wanted to show was something like this. And again, when I was shooting this, I was thinking about what I was trying to get out of it. It was my first thought, was how am I going to make this work? The sky in the background is way too bright and he's up against it. So either I have a silhouette, which I do there, which is pretty cool, or I can create something really pretty. And then what I'm looking at is this histogram to make sure I'm not clipping any of him and make sure that I'm not blowing any of the sky out. So I have this detail that's sitting there waiting for me to use. And what I can do is by lifting the shadows, I now have brought all the detail back out in him. Yeah. By dropping the highlights, I can change that. But in this case, I actually don't want to move that around too much, because what I was thinking is coming down to a little section called color grading over here. And color grading is a fascinating place because it allows me to work within different areas. So I have midtones, I have shadows, and I have highlights. So if I work to my shadows, I can make all my shadows look purple, or the darker areas, and change their color. But that's not what I'm really trying to do. I do, though, want to move my highlights to make this more artistic and to make sure that the sky looks something a little crazy. And again, I want a little bit more detail through him, and I don't want too much chaos that side. So each time I'm just moving, and I can now work on the intensity. Obviously that's going to be a bit silly, but we can work it that it looks a little bit like a pinkish sunset and this guy in the front. So we'll do that. Again, I'm going to come up and I'm going to choose my subject. So I find him. And this little guy, I'm going to add some texture and clarity again to make him pop a little bit more, make him really work and look beautiful. And I might drop the saturation in him just so or we could bring it up just to give him a bit more of his normal color. I like that. Sorry. And this is the beauty of this. It's push and pull. If I go one way and I go, no, that's not so nice, or whoa, that's too much, I can just keep going each way to find the happy medium. And what you often need to do is when you're editing too much is walk away, take 10 minutes away, come back and re-look at an image, because what you could get is a little overwhelmed at it and it looks great, but when you leave and come back, you go, whoa, there's way too much color in that. I can also bump a bit of the sharpness up in that. So we've gone from that to that, a really pretty change. And again, your colors, we could have really worked the colors around depending on what we wanted to. I could have made it more realistic in terms of making it a blue sky and deepening or darkening that blue or bringing it out. I could have taken it really one way or changed it. I'm actually quite liking this little bit of deep purple that's going on there. Let's go there. That looks cool. So again, it's now my creative, it's my art, it's my change. So I'm happy to do what I need to. I might even crop that in a little just to focus you, the viewer, a little bit more on that. And leaving the space up top here is positive space, negative space below. So his feet aren't on the bottom and he's looking up and you going, oh, I wish I could see up there to see what he was looking at. He was actually looking at nothing, but he's a young leopard. This guy was about just short of 2 years old and was playing around waiting for mom to bring him a meal. Then we had a moment that was very cool. This was a young elephant just dust bathing, and there was a bit of light coming in from the background, so I was trying to get all of that. And because of my camera, I am shooting at 50 megapixels. It leaves me a lot of space to crop. And that's why high megapixels can work sometimes, because it gives me a lot of different options. And this gives me 8,000 pixels across. And while this looks cool, I'm going to edit it in two ways. So first, I can create a virtual copy, which will now at the bottom here, I'm going to open that, give me two different copies of the same image. Still only has one base image, but two algorithms linked to it. And until I export them, it is only one image that has been changed. And this gives me the power to do two different edits to one image. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to edit it full like this, and I'm going to try bring up these whites because I want this contrast to really kick. I'll bring down the highlights because I don't want anything blowing out. You can immediately see that up here I'm blowing out his forehead. If you look on the forehead, it goes all white. So I'm going to bring that down to balance that light, and I'm going to bring the shadows down to create a bit more contrast. And that's pretty much, besides that, let's do my normal, highlight the subject and crank up a bit of texture and clarity in there just to bring out the bits and pieces there. So that's before, very flat, but I shot it that way in order to balance light, to that, which now has a lot of punch. I can also then say, right click and go to settings and copy settings, and I can choose what settings I wish to copy. So I'm going to choose all of those settings and say copy, and then go to my other image and say paste settings, paste settings, or you can use your Command C and Command V. But in this one, I'm going to crop it in. I'm going to get tight on this head because I really want to show off this dust and the face and the light. It's a bit low there. Let's get him there. That's looking a bit better there. And I want the elephant to become a little bit more punchy in this sense, in terms of making this sand really stick out. And this detail in all of this do what it needs to do. And now there's very little distraction. We're left with just this little elephant, which I'm still trying to find the right point. That looks much better there. And then the elephant looks a little blue. So I could either warm the entire image up and really give it this golden glow, which I quite like, or I can take it back and he looks a little blue there. And then I have a HSL color slider, hue, saturation, luminance, and I can go to saturation, and there's a little button sitting right over here that if I click, I can go over a color. And if you look on the right around the blue, it will start to pull those colors down and desaturate those colors. Or I can oversaturate them depending on what I want to do. So I'm going to go and I'm going to find a nice blue spot here and then pull that down to remove the blues so the elephant looks gray like it is in real life. And that'll be before, and that's after. And I love that. Now, because I have so many megapixels, I'm still at 4,000 pixels across, which effectively is 25 megapixels. So that's the same as my A9 II, which is another great camera. So no problems with that. Then we have this guy. Beautiful male lion walking towards us in the dusk, and there's a spotlight that's being used by another vehicle. And I want to create something really dramatic with him, something that's really going to pop. And these are where the creative side of things, where we really start pushing and pulling things. So the coloration on this is too warm. I actually want to pull this all the way down so that he doesn't get blue, but everything around him starts to get this blue, cold feeling to it. I'm going to crop it in tighter and ensure that I don't cut off the bottom of his feet, even though I can't see them, and his eyes around the power spot. and him looking into the image and this negative space to the side here. And that now starts to create something very different. Again, I'm going to accentuate this by using the radial gradient. I'm going to put it around him again. Let's invert that. And I'm going to cool that outside even more so that we get that really cool feeling of winter and this deep, dark, scary male walking through there. And I'll add a subject mask over him. Neptune seemed to find something very strange out here, which I do not want it to do. So we'll take the brush and we'll remove that from our selection. And I'm going to crank up some texture, some clarity, bring up the whites on him. So we start to bring in that power of that light coming through him. And I like that a lot. That's before, that's after. So we've really got a bit creative with this. We've taken this to a different level of understanding, and it might need a little bit more bleeding of that coloration around the edge here. So I'm going to choose this mask again and spread this out a little wider or even tighter like that, just to bleed off that blue. No, I still don't like that. Keep that really tight in there. There we go. And let me make sure that we're still on all of those things. I wanted a little bit more light. Yes. So that effectively shows you how we can push the creativity of these bits and pieces. So I love the creative edits. I don't do them a lot, but when I do, it takes a bit more time than the others. Now, I did show some star editing, and I didn't show any star editing last time. What I wanted to show you is how I edit stars. So when we were taking this is in Sossusvlei on one of our Namibia trips. Really beautiful place, epic for stars, one of the best places in the world. And the foreground light here was because of the lodge. Most of the lights have been turned off, but just that ambient light drilling across made a big difference in the way we saw the light. So in this, the first thing I'm going to do is again balance light. In this case, it's pretty well balanced. I don't want to overdo anything, but I could probably lift the highlights a little bit to bring this stuff in. And I'm then going to select my sky, which it'll do pretty well for me. And with stars, I want to balance the color of the night sky. Too blue, I like the sky being a bit blue because space is cold to me, but too warm means it looks a little out. So I like to find the happy medium here, which at this point I think is around there. Texture and clarity we want up because it's going to bring the stars out. And then the major thing that's going to make a big difference is this dehaze tool. It's an amazing tool that's been added into Lightroom, and it really pops stars. It makes such a difference. I might cool this down a touch more just to get it a little bit more blue, and that's all I would do. In a few quick seconds, wham, bam, thank you very much. We are done with that. So before and after, before and after. Because stars have a little bit more creativity to them, it allows us to do stuff. And I love to push the boundaries of what these programs can do by trying to do panoramas of the Milky Way. When the Milky Way is low enough, what we can do is you put your camera vertical on your tripod, you take an image, you turn it, and you try and overlap them about 50%. So first image, second image, third image, fourth image, 5th, and then that's it. But what I want you to notice is have a look at the tree that's sitting right here. In that one, it's tilted to the left. In that one, it's tilted to the right, just because of perspective and how we change them and the bow of the lens. But the computers are so amazing at this. I can highlight all of these by shift clicking and then hit a right click and say photo merge panorama. And in a mere few seconds, it is able to take darkness and put it to light and put it all together. And I will say merge. So it'll take a few seconds to put it together. And then when it's done, we will then again edit it. The light that you see in the background of these images is from a nearby town. And again, because we're so far out in the sticks, so this is the before image, so really pretty. I mean, now you have an entire Milky Way stretched across the sky. We need to edit this. First things first is I want to make sure, I'll bring this crop in a little bit, and I want to make sure that the ground appears straight. Otherwise, that's going to mess with my head the whole time. I may want to bring in the foreground like this, but what that's going to do is bring in a lot of noise. But I have my awesome tool called denoise by Topaz, so we can fix that in a bit. And we've got stars and Milky Way, which is put together very well. So what we'll do is we'll select the sky. It's missed a whole chunk of sky there, so I'm going to add that in with a brush. And I'll forgive it this time because it just works very well in so many other things. And then I've by mistake gone over this tree, which is not advisable, so I will subtract luminance range. So this is now how light or dark things are. So by clicking on that, I've taken away anything that's dark in that section. So if I go back to my brush, I can brush back in here and make sure I get everything except the things that are in that luminance range. And if I go, sorry, there's the luminance range. And I can change this luminance range by moving this piece backwards and forwards. So we'll just find the happy medium there, right there. And now we're going to start editing this guy. Again, texture, clarity, and we will find our temperature and bring this a little cooler. And I'm going to hit that, bring that clarity button right up, which is going to bring that Milky Way to popping length. Cool. So that's before, that's after. So now I got this nice disparity. And as a last thing, I will go in and say, I'm going to take it into Photo AI because I wanted to sharpen up some of the stars in the foreground and get rid of some of this foreground noise. So it all does it in one space, which is a great thing to do. So this might take a little bit longer. We'll see what we're doing. That wasn't too bad. And we wanted to remove noise and sharpen. So already that's done a great bit. Let's see what motion blur does. I think that did an even better job. And the remove noise, just having a look at the model and what it does. Amazing. Strength, will bring the strength down a little bit. And we can have a look at the different things. So that's all I would do. I'm going to save that back to Lightroom. And while that is going back there, I will leave that as our final screen. And I'm ready to take some questions. Rob?
All right, now before we start in with the question and answer session, I would like to remind everyone that you can submit your questions via the question field in your control panel. All right, so let's get to some of those questions. So That baby hyena picture you took, where was that?
That was at Mala Mala. So on our hidden South Africa trips, we go to 3 amazing camps, ending off in one of the prime safari destinations on the planet for wildlife viewing. It just is almost second to none in terms of the things you can see there. And it was really, really beautiful.
Does your camera have a way to do a panoramic shot, or do you use a specific panoramic lens?
No, so I will just use any lens that I'm taking, that I'm using at that time, and I will click and then move across and click and move across and click and take those structures, making sure that I try and keep as flat as possible. So I'm trying to keep my same aspect going at the bottom. If I'm shooting a panorama that's wide like this, I'm shooting vertical, so I get as much top to bottom information in, and then shoot across. And if I'm shooting up, say a tree, I will shoot landscape up and then stitch them together in that way.
So is it possible for you to explain what noise is again for us?
So noise, let me find something that's going to, noise are little dots, almost look like snow in an image. So let's go back to Andrew here and to this raw image. So if you look carefully, and I'm gonna boost this right up to an unnaturally large size, but you will see there's almost this snow within the animal. That is noise, and it's created by 2 things: a high ISO, so basically it's like an amplifier on a radio. If you put the volume really high, the speakers will start to distort. And because of certain things in the camera, we're amplifying the light that was in this dark area, and it's creating this distortion. So what we need to do is we need to work on it in order to bring it back so it is not as severe. So again, I've over exaggerated that, but you can see noise to less noise. And doing it with the right images will give you great results. When we look at it like that, it looks much better than when there's noise. And it's a lot of us photographers that become pixel peepers, and we're the only ones that look at an image at that level. But if you're looking at the image behind me, you're doing it from a distance when it's a big print.
Great, thank you so much for that. So is Topaz standard in Lightroom, or is Topaz and Sharpen AI, are they plugins for LR, or do they stand alone? And where can I get them?
So they are a standalone thing. You purchase them on their own. If you Google Topaz, T-O-P-A-Z, you will find it very quickly. They've got multiple different things. They've got the sharpen, they've got the denoise, they've got the photo AI, and for anyone interested in video, they also have video AI, which lifts quality of video and also sorts a few things out, and it's pretty spectacular. But they are separate to Adobe Lightroom, but it's a once-off purchase. It's not a subscription purchase. So you purchase it once and you get the updates.
So what is your primary editing computer? Do you use a MacBook, an iMac, or Mac Studio? And what kind of process does your Mac use?
So I use a MacBook Pro 16-inch with an M1 processor, and I upgraded last year because of the amount of video footage that I was using, and I needed something to speed up. And especially once I started shooting with the A1, which is 50 megapixels, each of the files can be up to 200 megabytes of file. And it really slowed down my ability to edit. If I give you an example, when I'm going through images, and I showed some of you this if you were watching last week, I want to go through images at this pace. I want to see things, and I'm picking and choosing images based on what I'm seeing at this pace. So I can go through 2,000 images in 15 minutes and have a rough pick of everything. and I had a 15-inch before, and it was lagging every time. So it added time to my edit. And if I'm at that sort of time of edit, it's really messing with my time with guests, my time alone, all these things. So it was value for me to spend the money on something bigger. I have been toying with the idea of a iPad Pro to take on trips with me just for rough edits, but a computer is always going to be a big thing. Mac Studios are awesome. I have a second screen which I use when I'm at home as a secondary device, but these screens in 16 inches is pretty significant for that.
So how much editing and post-processing do you do in the field?
As much as I can, because it means that then when I get home, I don't have as much to do. So to give you an idea, I still have to edit all of my photos from my last trip. So if any of you that were with me, they'll be with you shortly. But I've whittled down from 8,000 images down to 80 images. And it will take me 2 hours to get through those 80 images because I do basic edits. Unless it is something for a print or something creative, I'm taking 20 to 30 seconds a photograph to go through it. And yes, it's time that I've spent, and I've done hundreds of thousands, if not millions of images that I've edited, but that process becomes faster and faster, and the faster my computer is, the better I can do that at that pace.
So in general, do you like to crop a photo first and then work on the color and the contrast exposure and et cetera, or the other way around?
Very, very much so. If I go into develop module, I like to use this sort of flow that they give you. So it would be crop first and get to the image I want, because there's no point in me changing color before I've cropped, or the shadows and the highlights, because depending on how much I crop will change how much I'm moving these sliders. So I'll crop first. I'll make sure my white balance is good. I will then sort out exposure if that needs it, and then work on my contrast and recovering light here. Then I don't use a lot of this overall texture clarity dehaze anymore since the advent of my masking tools, because now I can pinpoint where I want that information to go and then move down to color grading should there be a need to change anything severely or make something artistic.
Great, thank you for that. So how come you don't denoise in Lightroom?
Lightroom does a good job of it. I will show you why very quickly. Let's go back to our hazy gorilla photo at 100, and I'm going to denoise in here. So if I go to my sharpening where you detail, and I go to luminance noise reduction, and I drag this, and I'm going to drag it a bit far just for the sake of this. Let's zoom in again to crazy. What ends up happening is it starts looking like a painting, and you lose the detail in these hairs. Now, obviously, I've gone crazy amount. Let's not be silly about this, but if I'm trying to get it to a point, a happy point, so let's go. That's as good as I'm going to get it with keeping the detail in the hair. But if we go to this other one that we took earlier, we have less noise, more detail in the hair than that one. So it's just a better tool for overall than what I would do normally. And that's probably the reason why I would do it more than anything else. But it's perfectly fine to do it in here. Just don't let your camera choose those parameters. If you have long exposure noise reduction or high ISO noise reduction on, the camera's algorithm goes in and does it, and it can make it look like a painting rather than an image.
Great, thank you for addressing that. So Can you use multiple Topaz programs on a single image?
Yep, absolutely. So I can move from one to the other because each one's obviously a little bit better. What I could do with a raw image, let's say this guy here, is as a raw, I can go file. Where are you now? Export Word, not we don't want to plug in extras and go straight to Photo AI. And then what it's going to do is work on the raw image. And this will change a lot of the process because now what it's doing is working on the raw. So you can immediately see the big change from there to there. The noise is a bit over exaggerated in here. You'll see this has become like a painting here. So he doesn't have fur anymore, which is too much. So it was on strong. We bring it back to normal. We wait for the model to come in, and that should do a little bit better. But again, it's still a bit over the top. And that in general will then do everything because it does the sharpen, it does the noise. And if I want to enhance the resolution, I can do that via graphics, natural graphics, and then I can change the size. If I wanted to, say I'd cropped it and I wanted more size, I could then take it to 2 times or choose a specific size that I wanted it in. So that gives us a great number of tools to work with within that.
Great, thank you, Richard. Unfortunately, that's going to be the last question that we do have time for today. So I'd like to hand it back to you for your closing comments.
Thank you so much. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Thank you, Rob. I was speaking to Rob about this earlier, but what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to look at all the questions that everyone's asked over the last 2 sessions, and in about 2 weeks' time, I will get back to you guys with a webinar based on your questions and what you want to know within this. But thanks for your time. Thank you, Rob, for hosting. Thank you, NatHab, and I look forward to seeing you guys next week.
Thank you so much for taking the time to present for us today, Richard. And I would also like to thank everyone who tuned in today. If you're interested in information on how you can travel with NatHab, give us a call at the number on your screen, or you can send us an email at info@nathab.com. Our adventure specialists are happy to help you out. Join us tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I will conclude the webinar. Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you next time.